Hello and welcome to Journey Lines, the show answering the question, how did they get there? I'm your host, Kim Minnick. Each episode, my guest is invited to complete a reflective exercise, plotting the highs and lows of their career, and then they walk us through it. With me today is Aubria Ralph. Aubria, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Kim. I'm so excited to go through my journey line with you.
I can't wait to hear your story. Aubria and I just met 9 minutes ago. So really excited to get to hear everything. But first and foremost, what's going on today? What are you up to either personally, professionally, holistically? What's happening?
So personally, I am actually in the middle of moving back to my childhood home because I am convinced that I can help sort out my mom's house. So
what kind of sorting out is happening?
We'll see how that goes. Really, it's about, I think, twofold. One, helping her just kind of prepare for her retirement. But then also kind of like clearing out the cobwebs, like all of the things that we just held on to for years upon years that like we haven't even looked at. And deciding
refresh.
It's time to, and I'm actually the perfect kid to do that with her because I don't have emotional attachments to things.
Can you come to my house? I have emotional attachment to things.
Like I think I had an emotional attachment to a scarf once. And my mom, actually, this was like I'm thinking back, this had to be like 2011, 2012. And I happened to be at her house then. And she was doing me a favor by trying to do my laundry for me. And that scarf was dry clean only. And I cried like I lost a child. And after that moment, I was like, you can never have an attachment like that to anything.
It'll just get ruined. It'll be ruined.
But I remember it's funny that like I would latch on to that of all things. Maybe that's why I'm taking pleasure in going to her house. And
you're like, oh, this is finally, we've come back around. What can I throw in the washer for you?
I think my mom has been kind of the hub for some of the extended family that lives in the States with us. And so she ends up just like collecting everybody's stuff. And so we just decided that it would probably be better to do that.
Oh my gosh. Well, enjoy the move. I'm sure it's no easy task.
Moving before the place that I'm in now, I think I moved something like 6 times in 7 years. Like,
wild.
Yeah, it was during my 20s actually. Like, I feel like I was always moving.
Like every time a lease is up, you're like, next apartment.
Yeah, like
go get that new resident deal.
Completely like non-committal in like the place that I was gonna live. And I think part of it is like this like desire to not be pinned to anything and like just having, it's like I've always just really enjoyed freedom in a way, and mostly like physical freedom, the ability to just kind of pick up and do what I want. And it's bizarre because I'm also very, very structured. So like the two personalities working together don't make a lot of sense sometimes because on the one hand, I'm Little Miss open, free spirit. On the other hand, I'm like, no, it has to be this way and only this way in this order. And, and so like,
I feel like you have very strong frameworks that you can pick up and move anywhere. Is that what it sounds like?
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. Amazing. Well, why don't you kick us off in your journey line? I see we are starting where so many of folks start in retail and corporate management around 2003.
Yeah.
We're kicking things off. All right. What's going on in your life then?
So I'm like in high school and
First job.
Yeah, so it's my first job. I had been trying to get a job for, I don't know, 4 years at that point, but my mom was just not having it. And then I turned 18. I finally turned 18, and she was a little bit more open to me getting a job. And it started out as like a part-time, literally 1 day a week gig because my mom said I could work weekends, but she really meant Saturday.
Just Saturday. Because you've got to go to school Monday through Friday.
Sunday was church. And
Sunday was church. So one day.
Like, we don't do things on Sunday. Like, we don't work on Sunday, And so it was one of those things where I remember like just even getting a retail place to agree to that kind of.
Oh, I can't imagine. Just one day.
But
was it in a mall? I imagine it's in a mall.
It was like one of those strip malls out on Long Island, and it ended up being a Staples. And I think the only reason he agreed is because one of my friends from high school recommended me. So really, my first job, like, it wasn't a real application. It was like, oh, you should hire her because she's great. And so I ended up being like a copy and print center associate.
Amazing.
And as a result, now have like I know way too much about like copyright and trademark and all this stuff as a result.
Do you have like paperweight preferences?
Like I'm the person that's like holding oh, is this 24-pound linen? And people are like looking at me like, what is wrong with you, Aubria? Like, why? Why are you this way? But
and still deep.
Yeah.
And still deep. I know people who like started at grocery stores and they're like, I would prefer to pack my own groceries. Thank you. It's funny how those early jobs stick with us.
They really do. But I mean, I feel like I learned, like looking back, I had a really good set of like managers in that place. Like I remember like the copy and print manager, she was just incredible. Like you always hear people talk about like servant leadership. I feel like she embodied that because she was just always so concerned about each person. Like she knew everybody's story and it was constantly in her head. So even as she made a schedule, like she was always thinking, oh, like our Jewish employees, like she knew like they can't be there for Shabbat. Like, and it was just like so natural for her. Like, I think like later on in life, when I started having to even discuss some of the things I had to discuss, it was so odd to me because I grew up in my work around people who were just so aware and willing to kind of like meet people where they are, which I think seems to be kind of going away more and more. Although we're talking about it a lot, I feel like there's really
the actual act of it
less like actually meeting people where they are. It's just, oh, we want to meet you where you are, but these are all the conditions that are attached, which doesn't really work, right? And so I remember I graduated high school and my boss was like, kind of looking for a new manager because the manager, she got promoted because she was so good. And I was starting college and I was like, I don't know if I could do college and like, I don't know if I want to risk it. Like, I just want to like focus on school. So I put in my 2-week notice and my 2-week notice was met with no, you can't quit because we want to promote you.
But you're so great and we love you. Your 1 day a week has been crushing it.
It was funny because and it's funny, I was just talking about this past week, and I feel like I've been talking about this a lot, just like the money aspect of work. And I remember when they said that, I was like, oh, well, how much does a manager make? And so I think it was like $10 or $12. Like it wasn't a lot of money, but for me, it was a lot because I did the math.
For a college kid in the early 2000s, like that's not a...
Yeah, it's like...
That's pretty good spending money.
And then we had stock options too and full benefits. And I lived at home and my mom paid for the car and she paid for the insurance. So like that was all my money. And so I remember like saying, oh, okay, like totally renegotiated the terms. And now like I was going to be the manager. I didn't want to leave anymore, but I had the financial capacity to just pay whatever scholarships didn't cover for school as a result. And so getting that manager title on my resume that early, like it completely like it, I couldn't imagine, like, I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what it looks like to like not have control of your schedule as an employee. I've been doing my own schedule since I was 18 and a half.
So you've always had this like layer of flexibility within your work and working full time as a manager at so early in your career and going to school full time, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
That's a wild time. And you go to SUNY.
Yeah, I end up going. So my mom like got in her head that if I went away to school, I was going to like turn into this like rebellious character that she created in her mind.
You seem like the rebellious type with your manager job and your Sundays at church.
And so like I was kind of like, I remember being really annoyed with her and just being like, you know what, fine. And so I ended up just enrolling in like the local community college. And for me, like, it's funny, I hear people talking about, what do they call it? It's like the shame, like some kind of, oh my God.
We called it 13th grade when people like would go to the community college. Like it was, and hindsight 2020, now that I understand money.
Yeah.
That's a better idea.
Oh no, it's like total. And so for me, this is like the pragmatist in me. Like the dreamer in me was like, I'm going away to school. But then when I couldn't, it was just kind of like, all right, like, how can you afford school without mom? And so, like, the fact...
Loans.
Yeah, and...
A lot of them.
And I was going to get low. And that was the thing. Like, I remember I had, like, teachers that were willing to co-sign my loans in high school. Like...
I mean, that says a lot about so much. Like, your ability as a student, the community that you grew up in, but also... Now that I understand money, I'm not trying to co-sign a loan for any 18-year-old.
Like, for me, like, looking back, I'm like, I had at least 3 teachers in high school that were like, if you need it, like, I will do it for you. And me being like, nah, man, you don't know my mother. Like, I'm not trying to wake that lion up. Okay. And so like, and ultimately I didn't want loans. That was not of interest to me. And so like the goal was, okay, we'll just pay for it cash. We'll figure out how to pay for it cash. And that's why when they offered that management role, like I did the math in my head and I was like, oh, so I could pay for school in like 2 to 3 months of work without overtime. But there was always overtime. So I could pay for a semester of classes on like maybe a month of school.
Man, that's huge. And you're taking a pretty serious load, chemistry and English major. And a philosophy minor. That's a lot.
I was such a nerd. I still am a huge nerd, even though I try to like act like really nonchalant. Then I like have these savant moments where people are like, wait, but you don't do that for work. Why do you know about this? And I'm like, oh, I just read a lot.
A lot. I know a lot about a lot of things. That's a nice place to be.
Part of the reason my undergrad focus was the way that it was, it's because I remember taking like AP European history in high school and learning about like the Renaissance scholars and deciding I was going to be a Renaissance scholar in like
Perfect.
in the 21st century. Um
Perfect.
and so like that was the goal. And so for me, like I graduated high school, I think with like 24, yeah, it was like 24 college credits. And so I went in.
Well on your way to.
Yeah, it was like one of, like I think I was like, I think we ended with me fifth in class. It was like so crazy. It was absolutely nuts that I went to community college. Let's just put it that way. Like when people saw me on campus, they were like, "Wait, why are you here?" like are you?
You're like, I am fiscally responsible and pragmatic.
But for me, like I never really cared about that. Like I never cared what people thought about what I was doing as long as I felt like it was right for me. Like I was never the kid that was peer pressured in school. Like I always tell people, even now as an adult, like people say, "Oh, why aren't you doing this or why aren't you doing that?" And I'm like, "You can't peer pressure me, man. Like if like
I'm gonna do me, thanks.
but what I really liked about focusing my studies in the way that I did is because it just went back to that freedom that I wanted. I wanted to be able to do whatever I chose to, knowing that I had like just like a vast interest base. And so it was one of those things where I was like, I was going to be a brain surgeon when I started college.
Amazing.
You know,
A Renaissance brain surgeon.
and I was convinced. I mean, I had all the credits, like even before law school. I remember like thinking like, is it going to be med school? Is it going to be law school? Like I had that conversation with myself again because I wanted to be sure, but like I actually enjoy law. I like I'm very like I'm into rules. Mostly like if I'm being honest, loopholes in rules. And
It's fun. It's like it's a adventure finding
it's
them.
like just constant puzzles, right? And I think medicine can be that way too. So I don't want to like say that it's not, but ultimately my obsession with books and people and how society works made me a better lawyer candidate than a
And maybe the written word too. I feel like with English and history, like that's so much of the written language.
Exactly. Like playing with language, writing in such a way where it's like either restrictive or, the embodiment of what you need. And so like just playing with that. So for me, like one of my heroes was Chaucer because he was a legal scholar. Like he, like I think
I love that.
he was like actually like a legal apprentice doing law by day while writing the Canterbury Tales at night. Like what? And like I read recently that he was like super controversial. I don't know, everybody's controversial.
Like in his time.
Yeah, in his time. No, but like like if you look at him with a modern eye, he's like it's like terrible human man. He's like a terrible person.
Not great.
But like who wasn't in the Middle Ages?
I mean, I find when people's fame brings them throughout history, they're either really great or really bad.
Yeah. And, and the Dark Ages was just not a time for goodness necessarily. Like, that's kind of why it was called that.
They titled it well.
They say it's because of like no learning, but like there was a lot of dark stuff happening during the Middle Ages. So feel free to look it up on your own time.
Yeah. Take some time. Go educate yourself on the Canterbury Tales and then Chaucer.
Yeah.
So it looks like you do decide to go to law school though around 2009. And then I see just a quick drop. And I also remember that market crash around 2009. Mm-hmm. How did those events play out in your life?
Yeah. So I was at this point working as like a store manager at an assistant store manager at like Calypso St. Barth. And that's like
Still crushing retail.
it's one of my favorite places that I worked because it was like I went into like a completely different world where people were buying resort wear no matter what time of year it was. Like it would be the dead of winter and some beautiful woman would walk through my doors and ask me to help her pick out outfits. And she would never be like, we would have cashmeres and stuff like that, but she'd always want the sarongs and the bathing suits and the tunics because, after the holidays, they were going to Aruba and I got to like help. And so like I just lived in this like suspended reality when I worked at this place. But I actually really enjoyed it because it's like I got to play dress up the whole time. I think prior to that, I was very tomboyish in a sense that like I wore a lot of baggy clothes. I think I've definitely regressed to that as an adult.
Look, I'm in my soft era. I'm wearing baggy, comfy clothes too, like cozy.
And so for me, I think that was like really good for me because it helped me like learn how to be like a feminine woman, right? Just being around women like that, in a way that like I'm sure like if I just paid attention to the women in my family, I could have done that too, but I was so anti as a kid. So
Of course, you have to see it from someone else. Like it could be exactly what family is saying, but no, this person obviously knows.
When it came to looks, like I remember as like, I think I was 16 and my mom wanted me to like, I think she wanted me to do like New York, like do like Miss Junior New York or something like that. And I remember like looking at her like she was nuts and being like, are you serious? Like, I don't want to be known for being beautiful. I want to be known for being smart. And like, just, and so it was like,
Interesting.
and so like really minimal focus on looks.
I wonder how many other self-described young nerds go through that. Like, I feel like a lot of time young girls are given the choice, you are pretty or you are smart, pick. And Disney, puts the glasses and then they're smart and takes them off and then they're pretty. Interesting that influence kind of came with you as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think it came from like I'm West Indian. I come from a West Indian family and the mindset's very much kind of like beauty fades and like, it's what you have on the inside that counts. Like, I feel like they had been like sending me those subliminal messages, like since I came out.
And then go be in Teen USA.
Yeah. And then like upset that I didn't want to wear a dress, like, prove that you can adjust and people will still not be okay. But yeah, and so like that place paid for the rest of undergrad. They
shout out resort
wear.
wear.
Making a lot of money there, and they paid for the first master's.
That's wild. Was this part of like the retail, pardon me, was this part of their like employee perks? Was it tuition reimbursement? No, or was it just like that cash money?
Just paid you cash money, like stupid money for like I got paid commissions and I was a good sales. I was like, although I was managing, I was also really good at sales and managers got to like get their individual commission and then a store bonus as well. And I was so like frugal back then because the goal was always work is funding school. It was never like that was always the priority. Like, and so the more money I got just went into my school fund. And so
I noticed you slipped in first master's.
Yeah, so I actually ended up getting a master's in medieval studies. And so
cool.
Yeah, they didn't think so. The family were not okay with that. I remember
I've spent money on worse things.
But, I had gotten into Fordham Law back then, and they weren't giving any money for school.
Mm.
And at Calypso, I was in charge of like doing the screeners for like people that were looking for jobs. And I remember interviewing a woman who I think she had graduated from Fordham Law too. Like, and she couldn't find a job. Like, she had been out of law school, I think, since like 2008, which is when like the market started becoming like crazy. And so by like spring of 2009, she still hadn't found a job. And the pragmatist in me was kind of like, okay, if she's looking for part-time work here, I I can't afford to take that kind of risk right now. Like,
It seems like a big risk for a law degree.
Yeah, and I knew law school was going to be the school where I would have to take out some loans just because of the nature of law school. And I ended up reaching out to the people at CUNY Brooklyn College, which is where I ended up getting my bachelor's degree, well after the application period for the master's programs, and begged them to let me in for fall of 2009 because I just had to like come to grips with the fact that like I was not going to law school that fall. But I wanted to go to school because I was like, okay, like you have your bachelor's degree, but you don't like, you need to like do more, like
what else? Yeah. I feel like I graduated around that time, around 2009, and it was very clear bachelor's degrees aren't going to get you very far at this stage.
Exactly.
So as any responsible student,
I was being
medieval
ambitious.
studies.
I will say, looking back, I probably should have gotten an MBA. Probably.
What fun is that?
But like, I think that like the anti person in me, the free spirit, was kind of like, well, I don't know anything about that period. I've read other things. I'll focus on this. And I ended up being like I think one of two women in the medieval studies program. The only black.
I mean, I imagine it wasn't a big program to begin with.
No, 3 people. And the only, like everybody else was like a 20th century or postmodernist like person, right? And so, and then I was like, I think I was the only Black person at the school to ever get it. Like, just like so ridiculous. Just like an
enigma.
And so for me, I was like, oh, this is going to be great. And it ended up being really awesome. Like, like I used to know Middle English. I don't know it anymore. But like there was like a period of time where like I could. And the coolest part about that role was it was kind of a joke getting that degree. Because if people with degrees that made sense in 2009 couldn't find a job, getting a degree in medieval studies during a market crash had to be the most. That, like, to me, it felt like such an act of rebellion. Like, whatever, world.
It's a little like, fuck you, economy, fuck you, school.
And I remember my mom being really proud when I told her, yeah, I enrolled in the master's program. And I didn't like go further until like her friends started asking her, well, what kind of master's is your daughter getting? And so like I remember her calling me up and being like, oh, like, you never told me what you're getting your master's in. And I was like, oh, medieval studies. And she was like, what? I was like, medieval studies, like that period of time, like during like the 1200s and 1300s. And she was like, I don't understand.
What are you going to do with that?
She's like, I don't understand. And I was like, yeah, no, I just thought it'd be really interesting. And I mean, I'm paying out of pocket, so it's fine, right? And she was like, okay. I remember she like hanging up the phone in like absolute like dismay, right? 2 years later, it's like the spring I'm graduating. And one of my professors has put my name on a short list to get one of the 3 positions they're offering to graduates to be a professor, to be like, I think we were, like adjunct professors, like
for medieval studies, I assume. Cool.
And so like graduation day, and I got a job, like I found out about that, I think in like March that they were doing that. And then I like got a job as an assistant GM at Papyrus, the card store, the overpriced card store.
Oh yeah. Love some stationery.
So good. I have way too much stuff from Papyrus still, from my stint working there. But I ended up getting a job there because I was like, well, it's adjuncting. I knew like adjunct professors who like didn't do very well financially. And I was like, we're not doing that. Like, it's cool to say you're a professor, but it's cool to have money. And so,
yeah, pay bills.
And so I did that. And I remember like on graduation day, my mom was like, yeah, and my stepdad was there too. And they're like so proud. And I didn't tell her about when I finally got, I knew by then that I got the adjunct professor role. I was like, oh, just so you know, I got a job because of this degree. And she was so happy because now she could like go back and report to her friends that now she had a college professor daughter.
Of course.
But but like for me, like it just worked out. And so like one of the things I always tell people, that I meet is, my life like didn't go the way I planned it, but I've gotten some really cool like bonus things along the way that I can't really explain. Like, I don't know why that professor took an interest in me and not an interest in other people. Like, I don't know why, right? I don't know why when I showed up to quit my job as an 18-year-old, my manager was like, no, like I don't know, like, and as much as I think I'm great, like there are a lot of great people who didn't have those opportunities, right? And like that's something I like always remind myself, like, yes, like I've worked really hard, I've been in the right place at the right time, and like all of, like I've planned and I've done all these things, but I know a lot of people who did too, and who even worked harder than I did and planned better and didn't like think it was a joke to spend 2 years getting a master's in medieval studies, who didn't like get the opportunities, right? And so like I always remind and this is where my faith comes into things, because I'm like the only way I can explain some of the things that have happened is like God has to be real for me. Like, because there's just too many coincidences. There are too many things where I'm like, that wasn't supposed to work out that well. Like, it was just so, like, it's like packaged so well, no struggle, right? Like, I remember showing up for that interview. That was like the coolest interview I ever had. And I took it seriously. Like, I showed up, in my suit with, I actually combed my hair that day. Like, I was really, I was ready, right? Show up. And 2 of the 3 people doing the interview for that role were past professors. And
you like know the whole interview panel.
And they didn't even interview me. Like the 2 who knew me were concerned that the other person had never met me. And so they spent the entire time telling her all the great things about me. I didn't have to answer one question. Like,
can we have more interviews that are actually just compliment panels? That would That's my new goal. Change the interview process, compliment panels.
But it was like, I remember, like, I always think back on, like, and that's one of the things where I'm like, what are the odds, right? The person who applies late gets a random degree.
But also the person who called and begged to be in that program. Yeah. The person who since high school has been investing time and energy into medieval studies.
Oh, yeah.
So, yes, and I think, a little sprinkle of faith and showing up.
Yeah, no, and so I'm definitely a believer that you can have all the faith in the world, but if you're not doing anything,
that's right.
And that's not even just me. That, like, the Bible says that. Like, faith without work is dead. So
oh yeah. So you're a professor for a long time, like 8 years, 9 years.
9.5 years. It's crazy.
Wild. And the school doesn't stop.
No. I think I was trying to convince people to pay me to be a scholar, and it just didn't. Like, I was trying to send subliminal messages to the universe to get me to be a paid, like, student. Like, just go to school, learn things, come up with ideas, and go back to more school. But there was just no.
Just didn't you try? I mean, gave it your best shot. You get a master's in nonprofit finance. Yeah. Is that what that is?
Yeah. So,
it feels like it feels very independent and free-spirited. Mm-hmm. Law school, English, chemistry, medieval study, finance. So how and why?
So finance, so I actually never took a finance class, but being a store manager, you have to manage the budgets. You have to manage the finances of a store. And so I think that's where the interest came. But also I've always been a money girl. I negotiated when I was 12 and a half, 13 with my mom that for every 100 that I got on tests, she would give me $100. And she ended up having.
That's a great negotiation.
So good. And she, like, I've always been, like, although I'm a good student, I'm a lazy student. And why I say that is, like, I want to do as little as possible and get the highest grade possible. Right. And I know, like,
I'm into it.
You're not supposed to say that, but, like, that's just who I am. And I feel like it got me through law school. Like, that's just how I've lived my life. Like, I never spent a lot of time studying, but if I'm, like, I pay attention in class, I'm engaged. I always do the reading because I'm a fast reader and I have really good reading comprehension skills, right? And so, like, for me, it's like, I'm the kid that has to show up to class because I need to, like, ask my questions because I don't want to teach myself anything. Like, that's just, it's like...
Like, you've already got this time reserved to learn it. It's in class.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it now. How smart. I wish I would have thought of that.
I got to go make money when I'm not in class, which is kind of my mindset. And I feel like even in college, they let me get away with that, where, like, I remember, like,
they let you get away with it. I don't think that's what they were doing. I think you were just a good student.
The reason why I say that is, like every college has attendance policies, right? But they didn't always apply to me because if I wasn't gonna, like, I would, like, give my professors notice. Like, I'd be like, oh, I'm not going to be in class for the next, like, 3 weeks because, like, it was, like, a busy time at work or something. And then I'd be like, but please find attached the, like, next, like, 2 to 3 assignments. And they were just like, let me, like, even on stuff they hadn't taught sometimes because, like, they hadn't gotten to that in the lesson, but it was, like, something I had learned before and could, like, write at that level. And so, like, it's talking about loopholes. And so it's like, on the one hand, I feel like some of them are kind of like, here she goes again. But like, no one ever like pulled me aside except for one professor. And I think she just like, there's always that one, right? Where it's like, oh, you need to be here. And I was like,
Rule follower.
thank you, but don't like penalize me because I did it without coming to class. Like, that's not cool, right? Because like, we're in college to learn. And if I'm learning and showing you that I'm meeting the milestones,
The
or at
expectations.
least, like, to me, at the very minimum, but like most of, like, if you're giving me an A, like, it means I've surpassed like basic expectations, right?
I think it's okay if I miss class a couple days.
Really terrible. So bad advice for like college students right now.
No, because the rest of the advice is show up when you can, do the reading, do the
Yeah.
homework. And if you're going to miss, get ahead.
Yeah, like, show them that like you're not being a slacker, and 9 out of 10 times you'll be rewarded, right? And so,
See, I just didn't show up to class and my teachers liked me less. So I think your approach
Yeah.
is quite nice, quite nice.
yeah, I mean, I think I had a chemistry teacher that would call on me when I'd be sleeping in her class because I was so tired from work, and she would always call on me, and I'd be like,
To wake you up.
and I remember like being startled so many times, but again, because I did the reading, and I guess I was like in those lectures by osmosis sometimes.
Putting in a podcast when you sleep.
Because I definitely like would answer the questions right, and then she would be annoyed that like I was able to answer the questions, But like, I don't know. I think part of it is like I grew up partially in the Caribbean. I learned like school was just different there. And so when I moved here, I was ahead. I was ahead by like 2 to 3 years. And so I feel like the things that I learned here in the States, I ended up reinforcing so much. Like, they're just things I'll never forget because I had to learn the same thing over and over again for like,
That memorization. Yeah, that.
And so imagine like having a teacher teach you the same thing over and over again, like 5 times for 5 years.
You're not an engaged student anymore.
Yeah,
You're just,
and
I've got it at this point.
yeah, and that's why I did a lot of outside reading, because like that was interesting to me, like, and so finance, because like I said before, I'm a money girl. Like, I don't think about life from like an emotional standpoint. I actually think about it from like an economic standpoint. Even policy, like and I've looked at policy from an economic standpoint since I was a student. And like, I think the first time I made an economic argument for policy, I was in probably 9th grade. And I remember people looking at me like I was crazy. People still look at me like I'm crazy now. And I'm like, don't you understand? Like, you can have the heart that bleeds the most, but if you don't have money to effect change in society and you have to rely on somebody else to fund it,
That ain't it.
no guarantee there. People change their mind all the time. Just look at our Congress.
Can I not, actually? It's wild that so young you had that realization, because I think so many of us are just, my hope and dreams and persistence will impact change. And you're coming in saying, and money.
Yeah.
And money.
Cash. You pull our cash. And
but
I think, honestly, I think that like comes from like the pragmatic side of myself, where it's, and just like I read all of those like philosophers, those political philosophers and economic philosophers, like why was I reading Descartes and Hume and like, I don't know why. Like, why was I reading that? I want to tell myself it was interesting, but I don't know. Like, I think it was more like curiosity. Like, what are these people thinking? What are they talking about? And how do we apply it? Like everything I read, I'm like, okay, how does this apply in real life? Like the Bible, how does this apply in real life? Like, and trying to like see like, okay, well, that doesn't really work, but like, how do we like shift this from a metaphor to like, what am I supposed to be learning when I read this particular thing? And I think
If
that
this is the sweeping lesson, what can I apply to my real life?
yeah. And so like, and I think that's what has kind of driven my curiosity is like this constantly like challenging what I already know by reading more and more. Like I was only a philosophy minor because I wanted to learn about like other types of like religions and all of that. And I knew I didn't have the discipline at the time, or maybe even the time to do it on my own, but I could do it in school.
And the school would force you, not unlike those $100 bills for the 100.
And I care about grades. Like I know people say like, oh, it's not about the grades, but it is.
It is actually.
It matters. I graduated law school 5 years ago and people are still asking for my transcript. So
Speaking of, you, after 2 side quest masters, you finally land in law school in 2017.
Yeah. And you can thank the people in the nonprofit finance master's program for giving me like a good boot because, before that degree, it was a student who challenged me because I always ask my students, the first couple of days of class, we did an exercise where they had to do like a diagnostic essay just to see their reading and writing skills. And I always just asked them where they saw themselves in 5 years, best case scenario, and had them write it out. And in 2015, spring 2015, a student was like, Professor, what's your 5-year plan? And I like looked her and I was like, oops. Cause I like
that's a very rude question and you do not need to ask me that. How dare you?
But like, I remember like, it was like, to me, that was like a nice slap. Like, wake up. What are you doing right now? And because I should have been in law school at that point and I just hadn't done it. And there were like a lot of.
Do you think you were still scared from that gal you interviewed who was still looking for a job? Were you kind of like hesitant to jump back into that wish or?
No, I think I was just comfortable. Because I worked really hard the first 2 years after I graduated from my medieval studies program. I worked really hard because I had like a full-time job that started out as like an assistant manager position, ended up with like a regional recruiting manager role, and I only did that work for 2.5 years. And I was teaching the whole time. So I was just like busy working. And then I think it was spring of 2013, I told the people I was working with that I was going to have a 4-day work week and make the same amount of money that I was making at the time. And then I made it happen.
Nice. Yes.
Because by fall of that year, I was doing that. And I literally, like, I taught my classes 4 days a week. And then I would, like, just pick up random odd things to do. And I'll pick the oddest thing that I ended up doing, which was I was a professional gift wrapper for billionaires on the Upper East Side. And
That sounds like such a satisfying, task-oriented job.
Oh, it was great. It was wonderful.
Oh, those edges, crisp.
It was wonderful. It was wonderful. And I did it for like 4 to 6 weeks every fall. Made anywhere from like 5 to 10 grand for 4 years straight.
I have been doing the wrong things in my life, Aubria.
It wasn't. And then they ruined it because like I think it was like year 4. They were like, "Oh, we were thinking we could like bring you on as like a full-time team member."
How dare you?
And in my head I was like, "To wrap gifts?" But then they like explained like she had like different house managers and I would be one of the house managers. And I mean, don't get me wrong. It was like psychotic money. Like,
Yeah,
I think
I'm
it
sure.
was like $250,000 a year plus bonus.
But I feel like that pay comes with a price tag.
Yeah. And your girl likes her freedom. So that wasn't going to be it for me. And I remember like telling them, yeah, it was year 4 when I finally stopped. And I remember telling them at the end, like, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Oh, and they also wanted me to sign an NDA that year too. And I remember
Wild.
being like, thank you so much. This has been so great, but I'm actually going to go to law school. So
such a good out. I'm going to go to law school.
and they were like, oh, we didn't realize that you were thinking about going to law school. And I was like, yeah, I'm actually a professor right now. They were like, what? You're a professor? Like, so like they, like I really value my privacy. I think privacy helps you have a lot of freedom too. And so I remember when they found out all these things about me in just that one conversation, they were like, oh, it makes sense why you wouldn't want to do this then. Right. But so yeah, I will say it was comfort because I was going away every like I would like get my family these like lavish like Christmas presents and birthday presents because of my job as a gift wrapper. And then I would go away every January for a month.
So good.
Yeah, it was like wonderful. And so like
that is comfortable.
Extremely comfortable. I was like helping my mom. I was like co-parenting my younger sister with my mom at the time too, because like her dad ended up passing away as well. And so it was like there was just a lot of stuff happening during that time. But when that student said that to me, I was like, okay, this is literally like God being like, bro, what are you doing? Like,
slap.
You need to get on with your life. And so that second master's was literally me being like, I don't know if I could like do like classes anymore. So I did that master's for that purpose. And it was it also was like, I was thinking, oh, maybe you could like start your nonprofit that you want to start. And so it was like one of those things where I was like, it's information and education you'll be able to use later, but you'll know if you could actually like make it through law school, if you can make it through this program. And so it was like an accelerated 1-year program. And so during that program, I think it was my contract. There was like a contracts class that I took. And the professor, he was actually an attorney. And I remember like having office hours with him and he was kind of like, okay, so like, what are your goals? And I was like telling him, oh, I'm like thinking about law school, but I'm doing this. And he was like, okay, that sounds great, but your responses in my class look like what the JD students, which are like law school students, should be doing. And so like, if you want to go to law school, you just need to go to law school and stop wasting time.
The universe. Just
it was like, okay. And so
you go.
Yes, I had to retake the LSAT because I had dilly-dallied a little too long at that point. And then I applied to law school. Fall of 2016 was when I submitted applications. and got into like 4 of them. Chose Brooklyn Law School because they had a 2-year program. And if I am a money girl, I'm definitely a time girl.
There's some pragmatism in there as well, right? Like shorter money, get it done.
Like, and so for me,
you've been waiting a long time to start.
Yeah, and so it was one of those things where I was like, you cannot delay it. Just like get it over with. And I knew whether I did a 2 or 3-year program, I was not going to be able to work like full-timey hours. And so that year leading up to law school, I ended up getting a random store manager retail position for a high-end brand to save money, to save more money.
Well, this is a constant and you're not shocking.
Yeah, to pay for, to like just pick up wherever. But I still knew, like I knew I was gonna have to take out loans, and I was like, but you need to have money in your coffers. Like you can't like just go in there blind and just take as many loans as you want. Like, no, you're not doing that. So like that for me started like doing that 2-year program, which they don't have it anymore. I don't think any of the law schools that ended up doing it have it anymore. But like that was, I think maybe it was just invented for that time so that I would like go and get my like
just anointed for you.
Yeah, like it was like if
I love it.
like God and the angels got together and they were like, if we don't get this set up the right way, she's gonna find an excuse not to go again. And so like I just ran with it, and I remember like quitting. I remember thinking I was gonna like stay with that like retail job like longer than I ended up staying. And the only reason I was gonna stay, I think like 3 or 4 months longer. And it was mostly because I felt a little bit guilty about abandoning them after we'd like built something really cool together. But when I told the manager, like the regional manager about it, she was like nice to me to my face. But then she like told my staff that I don't know what I'm getting myself into. And she hoped
you're like, no, I have a pretty great idea actually.
Yes, I make it. And then they told me that, and I was like, oh. And I was like rearranging my life to like be able to help them. And I remember just like reaching out to her and being like, hey, you know, I thought about it and it actually just makes sense for me to be done. And I like inserted like the date and like ended it because like, and I think maybe that was the last time I was like loyal to a job like that.
Yeah, I mean, again, that sometimes you get slapped in the face with things.
And I had to, you know, because like I think up until even like being a professor that long, like it was just this like sense of loyalty that I had to my employers, but also to the students too. Like I feel like I created this like false sense of duty in being there to maybe avoid life, to avoid like, you know, being a grown up.
Well, speaking of life, it comes at you fast. And while you're in law school, your journey line is so interesting. We have 2/3 of the things below the journey line happen in your 2-year law school. You're hit by a car, and then we go up and you're a summer associate, and then we go down again because you have a mass removed. What the hell?
That year was so annoying.
That year was so annoying.
I mean, so I was literally well on my way, right? Like, it was like I finally got a groove. I found out about like big law opportunities. I went into law school as a public interest fellow. And then like the smartest kid in our like class, he cornered me in the elevator one night. We're like headed to like property class together. I shouldn't say he cornered me. We just ended up in the elevator together. So dramatic. And he like looks me in the face and he's like, so you're going to be doing big law too, right? I didn't know what he was talking about, but I thought to myself, well, he is certainly threatened that I'm going to be doing whatever it is this is. And so I said, sure, looks like it. And then
Hey, girl.
and then I was just quiet the rest of the ride, right? Hop out, go to the bathroom, take out my phone, Google, what's big law? So ashamed.
Sure looks like it after I figure out what it looks like.
And I remember seeing that, like what that was. And like I had heard about like corporate law and like top law firms, but like I didn't really know about the salary. And looking back, I'm like, for money, girl, the fact that you didn't know about this is really hilarious. But I think for me, going into law school was more about getting my piece of paper than it was about getting money. Because I knew
paper all the same.
and right. And so, but I knew with that piece of paper, I could guarantee myself at least $100,000 a year, which like in New York City for the average person is not a lot of money. But for somebody like me who can like commit to eating rice and beans forever, it can be a lot of money. And so like it was one of those things where that's why public interest looked interesting to me, because I thought, well, I could do this, but I can do like all my other odd things that I do anyway, you know? And I find out about this opportunity that's available, and I look it up and I'm just kind of like, wait, what? They're paying people 40 grand to work for 10 weeks? How do I get this?
I need to look into that.
Summer associate role. And I remember being like, we're getting one of those. And I wasn't even thinking like, I know people are going to be so mad when they see this podcast, but
Fine.
And I'm okay with that. They're already mad. This was just make them more.
Anger breeds engagement. It'll be great.
So like what was really funny and fun for me about it was I thought, girl, you're probably going to work hard anyway. So if they're going to pay you to work hard, you should at least try. And so like,
give it a shot.
And so like, I found out about it with enough time to make sure my grades were in line with what they were looking for. Right. And so like, I think like my first semester grades, I had like a B+ average, which really annoyed me, even though I already told you.
It's not bad.
I don't really work that hard. And so I was mad. But I think I was more annoyed when I found out that I could get a raw score of a 90 or better and still end up with a B+. Like it just didn't feel like justice to me. And I was in law school. And I thought law school.
And I need justice.
Law school was about justice. And then they explained the curve to me. And I was like, oh, so like you guys only give out like X amount of A's? I was not aware of that. And so I literally made sure, and they did like a percentage. And so for the rest of law school, I don't think I ever took a class that had less than like 50 people in it, because I knew I could like keep doing my current system of being a student and get, and for me, like people, they're like, oh, they need the A+. Like I was not that kid.
I need the A.
I just need it to start with A. So it could be A-, it could be A, it could be A+. I don't care. As long as that letter has an A, like my name, we're cool. And, and so like, I remember like doing the math and thinking, okay, well, this class is like 100 people. They can only give out like 12 A's in this class. I think I could be one of those A's. And I would just sign, like I literally chose my classes in that way. And so I remember my GPA jumped so that I had like an A- average by the end of my second semester. And then I got hit by a car.
Jesus.
Like a month later.
You're like, crush it. I genuinely forgot for a second. And you're like, yeah, I'm doing so great. And then I got hit by a car.
And that's and for me, like, I think that's why, and that was like February 2nd, 2018, most annoying day of my life ever.
Were you in a car? Were you not in a car? How?
I was walking.
Oh my God.
Class. And
that's terrifying.
Yeah, no, it was crazy. And it's like the car bounced off of me, man.
I think you might have bounced off of the car.
I didn't fall.
Oh, that's nice.
And like, I used to think so, but like the pain that persists as a result of me not falling is kind of incredible. Like, it's funny when I think about like that day. Although I think if I had fallen, I wouldn't be here, because I don't think he would have stopped. Because I think the person was on their cell phone at the time. And they just turned into me. And so like, and it's funny. It would have been a funnier story if I was headed to torts. But torts, they do like personal injury stuff in torts law. So like that would have made it like, for me, like,
so fresh.
Like the only thing that I'm like, if I could change a fact about that day, it would have been I was like headed to torts and then I got hit by a car. But I was headed to contracts.
Not as good as torts. Not as good, objectively.
And so like my professors, they had to like figure out, and I'm so grateful for them, because they ended up figuring out how to help me in my quest to not take a leave of absence. Because I was just kind of like, I only have 2 years. I'm not extending. I didn't want to extend my time in law school, because like I was already on like the 2-year pay structure, and like too much money had already been spent, kind of thing.
So you didn't even take a leave?
No.
Were you dealing with injuries? Like, how were you managing? Were you scared to walk to class again?
Yeah, so I ended up having 4 bulged discs in my neck and 3 in my lower back, and a bruised sacrum. So it hurt to sit and lay down. And so sometimes I would have to like stand in the middle of class. And some people were smart enough to know that like something was going on that was probably none of their business. And then there were people who would like come and be like, why don't you just find another chair? And it's like,
you are not one of the 12A's, are you, huh?
You know, yeah. And so, but like, I will say, like, I remember when I told, I think it was my con law professor. Yeah, it was him. I told him about what happened. And he was like, oh no, we need to get you accommodations. And I think probably for the first time in my law school's history, they recorded all of the classes that I was in.
Amazing.
And,
great accommodation.
And every student got the benefit of it, though.
Yes. Yes.
And that
normally how that works when we do inclusive things, everyone benefits from it.
And it was like, and I remember when I stopped being like a big baby about the whole thing, it was when I realized how, like, I've never had any physical issues my whole life, right?
Mm.
And so, like, as much as I think I'm aware and I'm, like, always paying attention to people, like, I know I've definitely missed it before this happened to me. But it raised my awareness, like, so much that now, like, if I'm headed anywhere, I'm thinking, wait, they haven't considered people who might be in a wheelchair. Like, how are they going to get in here? Like I'm thinking about, it's like, I feel like I've always thought about like people with mental illness or, or neurodivergent, personalities, right? But it's so crazy when I think about it. I didn't really consider physical disability nearly as much until
it takes
un-
it takes something to open up that
and
perspective.
yeah,
Just like your first boss who was so kind and considerate, now you have another thing.
exactly. And so like for me, like I remember I had a coach in high school. She called me arugula because she just couldn't say my name. And so it's like really terrible. And I laughed.
Your name's not difficult.
I know my name's like super easy. I think she just loved calling me arugula. So we'll go with that. And she used to always say to us that our team was as strong as the weakest link. And I started thinking about that statement a lot more after I got hit by a car. Being hit by a car actually ended up being more of a blessing than it was a curse, because as they were doing all of these MRIs and CAT scans, they stumbled upon this mass. And so I actually found out about the mass about a month after I got hit by a car.
The hits keep on coming.
And I remember being like, God, are you for real? like, what is your problem? Like, are you mad at me because I took forever to come back here? Like, what is your deal?
Did I do something? Have I annoyed you in some way?
Give me a break, man. And
this one feels personal, sir.
Like, it really did. It felt like I used this image earlier this year. I felt like I was an ant under Billy's magnifying glass in the height of summer. Like, that's how I felt during that time. And but it was fun. Rightfully so. Yeah. But what was really, again, it was like all of these crazy things, like really negative things were happening simultaneously. It was like, I remember talking to my doctor and him being like, oh my God, we need to check that and like getting on it. Like, I mean, I think I've been seeing my OBGYN since I was like 22.
Mm-hmm.
And he had to have been like 26, 27. Like I was like one of his like first patients he ever had, kind of thing. And so it was like one of those things where it was like in my mind being like, oh, this is why I still come to you, because like you take care of me. And then his mentor ended up being the surgeon that took the mass out. And I don't know if I would have been able to have his mentor do that for me if he wasn't my doctor, because he normally had like a 4-month wait for an appointment, and I was able to have an appointment in a week. And like he examined me and he was like, listen, like we can like get you in and take it out. Like, and like he was like, we can have a date within a month. Like I checked my schedule already. But that would have been in the middle of a very critical semester for me.
I mean, school comes first, clearly.
No, like totally, right? Totally. And it was really funny because he was kind of like, well, we can put you on some hormones so that it doesn't grow anymore. Because we determined that it wasn't malignant, but it was just obstructing my digestion.
It's causing problems. It's got to go.
Everything. It was a pain, right? And so like, but we ended up like, and I was like, well, how long can I like keep this thing in me realistically? And, and he was like, well, you could wait until after you graduate if you wanted to. I wouldn't recommend it, but you could if you're okay with like having this discomfort. And so I let it rip. And so I knew it was crazy because like I knew for a year and a half before that thing came out of me that it was
That feels like a ticking time bomb just chilling inside of you.
And it was the size of a softball.
Ooh, good size. That's like a
Yeah, it was huge. But I ended up getting 12 interviews for big law opportunities.
you and your tumor taking on the world.
I ended up doing like a China abroad thing. I did like a China abroad thing. That like that same, it's so crazy. Like that 6-month period is bananas because I get hit by a car, find out about this mass, go to China, get these 12 interviews, get callbacks, get a gig at like a magic circle firm, you know, and it was like a top UK firm that like nobody ever heard of. But I was like, oh, I like that name. I think I want to work there. And so it was my first choice. The first firm I worked at was my first choice firm. And as soon as their offer came, actually, let me not lie. As soon as I met those people, I convinced myself that they loved me as much as I loved them. And I did not take any further interviews because I don't like to waste people's time.
Bold move.
And my career services advisor almost had a heart attack because she was kind of like, girl, nobody does that. And I was like, we'll be fine. Don't worry. We'll be okay. And a week later, I got my call. And by then, that was like, I think the second to last week in August. Like we had just gotten back to school for the fall. And I was walking in the courtyard, got a call from that firm telling me, I was like, yeah, they're like, we just want to welcome you. And I remember being like, yes.
Yeah, celebrating in the quad. I feel like that's like a 90s movie moment of you just like.
And I actually did it too, which is like I look back, I'm like, who are you? Like, you're really. But it was so, like, it was like, almost like, yes, like things are finally going in the direction that they need to go kind of thing. And I feel like it did. Like, it was just smooth sailing my second year of law school. And then I graduated. I summered. My cousin finally got married.
Oh, congrats, cuz. And you stay at Allen and Overy for a while after your summer associate.
Yeah, so I ended up, it's crazy. So I ended up they wanted me to start right away after I did the summer associate thing. But because I had delayed getting the surgery, I had to postpone that. And so I remember when I had those conversations with them, they were like, okay, no problem. And the fact that they even asked me to start right away was something that like never happens. But because I had already graduated at that point, they were willing to make an exception. And so, like, they ultimately, in my book, like, they solidified themselves as a really good place to work because they were so accommodating and not in a way like, I think there's like levels of accommodations where, as somebody who has had accommodations since this accident, I think that there are a lot of people that have expectations of the workplace that just can't be met. They just can't be. And you kind of have to get creative about how you get those things met, right? Whether it's like negotiating it, because there's just no playbook for it, right? And it's like doing it in a way that gets you the yes rather than a no.
Yeah, that gets you what you need.
I think going in with like your fist almost never gets you what you want. It certainly hasn't gotten me what I wanted.
I mean, coming from the HR side of it, definitely like I like honey more than fists, and I think, it's on the HR partner to be collaborative and responsive and listen. But yeah, make accommodations.
Yeah,
Because as we already learned, they're probably going to help more people than just the one.
exactly, and so for me, like, and I just want to plug them because like I feel like I know that that's not how it is. Like there were just things at that organization that were just standard. Like you didn't need an accommodation letter. You didn't have to bring in your private doctors.
Medical records.
Like,
Oof.
like it was just like some of the stuff was just standard, right?
Yeah.
And I think when you're coming from a place of true inclusivity, you're thinking from the lens of we're only as good as our weakest link. And if the organization happens to be the weakest link in that scenario, that's a problem.
Oh, I love that. That's a mic drop. Well, you stay there for a while. You do your summer associate there. You're there for another 2 years post grad. And then you move on to a new associate role. Keep stacking up. Tell me about we're towards the end of your journey line. Tell me what's ending, and I'm excited about your last block and what's happening next.
Yeah. So I always wanted to be like, it's funny. Like I did have that blip where I wanted to be a brain surgeon, but I have childhood memories of wanting to be a lawyer. I've always been obsessed with like legal shows. To this day, like I'm like so like if there's something about the law happening in the show or the movie, even if I've seen it 1,000 times, I will sit there and watch it again. Like it's that like for me. Um and it's crazy because most legal shows are about litigation, but I ended up becoming a transactional attorney. And again, that was actually a very intentional, strategic move for me. And it was a form of activism for me as well, because there aren't a lot of Black women doing finance. And it was something I was just naturally good at because no schooling, but the more I heard the concepts, they just kind of stuck to me like glue. I would think about it in a very just broad way. Like I'd get into the nitty-gritty, but I'd also look at the big picture as well. Like it just always excited me in a way that even like I remember asking myself sometimes, like, are you for real right now? Like, why are you this excited about this? Like, this is like not even the people that have been doing this for 20 years are excited. Like, calm down. But it just really excited me it's funny because like I will never, I know you're not supposed to say never, but it's very, 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 very unlikely that you will ever catch me outside at a rally. That's just not my ministry.
It takes all types.
Right.
Some are loud, some are out there, and some gotta work behind the scenes.
And so like when I was a professor, I could have tried to go and work at like an NYU, especially after I got my experience. I could have tried to like go to one of these other places, but I stayed with CUNY because I got to work with first generation kids a lot of the times. I'm first generation, everything. I got to work with Black women. I got to work with immigrant, kids, like, and so like them seeing me and me being able to help them get what they wanted for me was always more important than me going, like, to me, like, I could be loud. I could be that person that, like, is on the TV. I can do all that. But for me, it's like, I'm more interested in getting, and people don't like this sometimes, I want bodies in the room,
Okay.
you know?
I'm here for it. Bring them together.
Like, I know there's been like this, I like really hate this quote, but like, surround yourself with people who talk about you in the room. I'm not very trusting. So I want to be in the room and for me, it's like, I would rather have you come in the room and speak for yourself than pretend that I have the ability to speak for you.
Oh, I love that.
Right. And so, like, for me, embodying that was being a finance attorney, being the only dark-skinned Black person. And like, there were always people that identified as Black, but like, they had to tell you. I don't have to tell you that there has to be some African in me, right? Like, you just see it. And so, in fact, I might have to explain the other parts of me more. And so, you know, which is why I always check the black box, because it's like, it's just easier for me, where I'm like, now I don't have to like go through my whole family tree and show you where all the intersections happen.
And no one deserves to know all of that when they first meet, like, it's a nuanced conversation.
Like, people are trying to figure out their own family trees, And so, and for me, it's like, I actually like, I think I'm like most other Black people in that way. Like, it's just the embodiment, right? And so one of my goals was people would see my face as a finance attorney and they were in law school and they would think, oh, that's an option.
Hell yeah. That's an option.
That's an option. Like, you don't have to do it, but that's an option. And what I loved about the first firm I worked at was they let me play a little bit when I first started. So I didn't just do finance work. I got to do like some capital markets, like, securities type work. But they like really valued pro bono work as well. So I got to do like immigration law stuff, help, do memos for like the litigation department. So I got to do like a lot of cool things while working with them. And so my face ended up being in a lot of places, doing a lot of things, showing the different options that are available to you, right? And so, like, for me, I can't afford to be in a box because I think part of my reason for being is to just show people that they're possible and just be that for them. And like, it takes sacrifice because like sometimes I just want to go on a road trip and like live my life and not be visible.
I mean, fair.
And be visible. Which is why when I'm not online or, in public, I spend a lot of time alone or just with immediate family because I'm like, you can't be public all the time. One.
You have to refill your cup if you give so much of yourself to.
And you kind of, and like, for me, like, I have to live my own life too. And so it's like balancing this like new evolved form of activism where it's like, when I left law last year, I left because I had come to a crossroads where I was going to have to fight to stay. But I should not have had to fight to stay. It was one of those things where I just decided I'm not going to fight. I'm just going to see how far you will take it. And however far you decide to take it, I hope you're willing to deal with whatever consequences come as a result of the actions that you take. And so, and normally that's not my personality. While I will fight for myself, I'm not a like confrontational person, although people think I'm confrontational. I'm really not. I would rather like not be that person, but I have the inability to smell something that stinks, not do anything. I just don't have that ability. And so, I came to this point where I've actually quit all of my jobs, except for my first job. I was fired from that job. And I was fired because somebody was bullying me. They knew that this person was bullying me. When I complained, there was retaliation. And my only saving grace back then was because at that point I had like transferred to a different location or whatever. I had been working part-time at this Calypso place that I was really enjoying. So I already had like my second job in
you already had that backup.
Yeah. And so like I didn't, I was annoyed, but I was just kind of like, whatever. I have my degree. Like, you already paid for the bachelor's. Calm down.
See ya.
And
I'm out.
but I remember like I thought about it's crazy because after they fired me, they asked me to come back.
Amazing.
Because the person who fired me didn't like run it up the chain. And so up the chain, I found out they had already like put my name was already on a list to be promoted. So I started getting calls about why I left. Because they had no idea why I left. Because on the books, it was like I quit, but they had actually fired me. And so it was like, and I remember being like, thank you so much for reaching out, but I don't want to work for a place that doesn't have accountability and oversight or words like that. I don't think I use those words, but like I was having a similar type of situation at this place. Right. And it was after, I'm going to speak it. And it was after they poached me from the first firm.
That's the worst. You tempted me to come here.
They spent 7 months trying to get me to come to even just submit my resume. And then they waited 3 months after I submitted my resume because I didn't want to leave my first job high and dry because I was in the middle of like a psychotic deal. And I wouldn't be able to tell somebody how to pick up where I was leaving off. There was just too many moving parts. And so I negotiated to start 3 months after I accepted their offer. Okay. I didn't get a sign-on bonus, but I didn't want that. I wanted time. And so they just offered time. I didn't have to negotiate that. And the time was, I lost a year by delaying starting at that first firm for a year. But because of how much work I had done at my first firm in those 22 months that I worked there. I had done more work than people that would have been fourth years at the new place. So they made me a third year associate.
Nice.
Right? And then 2 years after that moment, I had people trying to convince me that I didn't know what I was doing. And it's kind of hard to skip a person a year and then tell them they don't know what they're doing. It's just hard.
It's hard. So I'm assuming you decided to leave.
Yeah, so I ended up leaving and I started Scrappy Girl Project.
Scrappy Girl Project.
Yes. And
I love it.
The name is funny because like people think that like it's because I want it to be like a woman-centric company, but the name is all about me. It's not about the people. It's really all about me because if you look,
you're like, it's an Aubria-centric company,
but like it's really about like a mindset. It's about a lifestyle of no matter what life throws me, it doesn't matter what scraps you give me, I'm going to make a masterpiece out of it. That's what Scrappy Girl Project is all about. And if you look at my background, if you look at my journey line, just the parts I've shown you, you see, wait a minute. This stuff doesn't really fit until you meet Aubria. And you're like, oh, this makes sense. Right?
Now that I have met you and heard the whole story, it does kind of make sense.
And it's crazy because I could actually rewrite my story to make every single piece fit exactly perfect. But I don't do that on purpose because I have to be honest about it for myself. So I remember, like, no, girl, you didn't plan that. Don't lie to those people. You didn't plan on being a professor. You didn't even think about it. It just happened.
And, I think that's why this is so interesting because, like, sometimes you just stumble into the right path.
Yeah.
And going from retail to professor to lawyer to now CEO and author.
Oh, yeah. And I wrote children's books randomly, too, somewhere in there.
Yeah, just a little sprinkling of literature. Aubria, that's the end of your journey line. What are you looking forward to next?
So I'm actually entertaining law firms right now because I actually miss being a lawyer. And I didn't think I would miss it as much as I did initially. And so like I know I've never had that before. This is the first time I've moved on from something where I'm like, oh, you need to go back and like you're not done.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is the rest of my journey really relies on me completing this leg. And so what does that mean for Scrappy Girl Project? Like how do I keep doing that while also being an attorney? And I think for me, it's less about me as a crutch. I think I don't have to be involved in the everyday all the time. And it's more about empowering people. And so I've been doing that by creating resources for people. Because my goal, even as a company owner, is not like most people's goals. Because I don't really want repeat customers, at least not for repeat problems. Like I'll help you solve a new problem, but we're not going to spend the next 10 years of my life trying to.
We're not revisiting. We move on.
Like we grow and build. And so so you kind of have to be a certain kind of client to work with me where like you have to be serious about wanting to finish what you start and build on what you're doing so that you are in charge of what comes next. Like, so that like there are a lot of like I wouldn't say I'm a coach, and I know that I'm not, because I don't want to be in your ear 24/7. I want you to be in your own ear 24/7, because I've been in my own ear, although I've had coaches, and I do like seek counsel and advice for pretty much everything. At the end of the day, my mindset is to live with every decision that you make and give anybody and can over your next move. Like you have to decide this is what you want. And, and so that's kind of, I guess that's it. The goal is go finish being a lawyer while also helping anybody who wants to keep pushing the envelope of where they are, develop that mindset, that mentality, and get it done.
Get it done. Well, Aubria, thank you so much for joining us today. Y'all can check out all of her links and information and her journey line in the description. And we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.